I found my family planning my sister's wedding at my beach house without asking. Mom said, "It's not like you use that place much anyway. Serena needs this." That's when I made one call that destroyed everything. The call was to Sandpiper Beach Tour Company, and within 30 minutes I had signed a legally binding rental agreement for the exact weekend of Serena's uninvited wedding. But let me back up and explain how we got here, because the numbers alone will make your head spin. I'm Rain, 32, and I work as a commercial loan officer at Coastal Florida Bank, pulling in $78,000 annually. 5 years ago, I scraped together every penny for a $45,000 down payment on my dream beach house, a modest 1,200 square foot cottage valued at $285,000. The monthly mortgage payments of $1,847 plus insurance, utilities, and maintenance costs average another $650 monthly. That's $2,197 coming out of my personal account every single month for a house I maybe get to use 12 weekends per year, thanks to my family's constant visits. When I bought the place, I was naive enough to give my mother an emergency key. That key somehow multiplied into a family master key situation. Over 5 years, I've documented 847 separate instances of unauthorized access. Yes, I counted. I've been keeping meticulous records since year 2 when I realized this was a pattern, not occasional family enthusiasm. Here's what those visits cost me annually. $3,200 in additional utilities from their extended stays, $1,450 in repairs and replacements for damaged items, $90 to $80 in deep cleaning after their gatherings, and $426 in restocking basic supplies they consume. That's $6,850 per year, essentially a second mortgage payment, subsidizing my family's vacation habits. But the wedding situation? That crossed every line imaginable. Standing in my transformed backyard that Friday afternoon, watching strangers hang 800 worth of lights on my grandmother's oak tree, I did quick mental math. Serena's Pinterest board showed 150 guests for a 3-day celebration. The utility costs alone for that many people would run $600 to $800. The potential property damage from 150 wedding guests could easily hit $5,000, $10,000. My homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover commercial-level event damage, meaning I'd be personally liable. I pulled out my phone and called the tour company while watching Serena direct the wedding planner. "I have a waterfront property available for corporate retreats," I told them. "Are you interested in an exclusive weekend rental?" 30 minutes later, I had a signed contract guaranteeing me $2,800 for the weekend, plus a $1,000 security deposit, with their insurance covering any damages. The timing was perfect. They needed exactly that weekend for a pharmaceutical company's executive retreat. While Serena continued playing wedding director, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. Patricia Holbrook has handled my real estate transactions since I bought the house. I showed her the rental agreement and explained the situation. "You're the sole property owner," she confirmed, reviewing my deed. "Your family has no legal rights to this property. The wedding planner's contract with your sister is invalid since she doesn't own the venue. You could actually sue for trespassing if you wanted to push it." I also hired a locksmith that afternoon. New smart locks with individual access codes cost me $340, but it was the best investment I ever made. I set the system to notify my phone every time someone attempted access. Now here's how I discovered the full extent of their planning. My cousin Brad had accidentally added me to a family group chat 3 months earlier, then immediately removed me. But not before I screenshot the chat name. Serena's Beach Wedding Planning. I'd been monitoring their conversations through my tech-savvy friend Marcus, who helped me create a fake social media account that several family members accepted as friend requests. The family group chat contained pure gold. My cousin Brad said, "Should we bring the big coolers for the 3-day party?" Aunt Linda asked. "Rain's place can handle 150 people easy, right?" Uncle Tom wrote. "Hope Rain doesn't mind us using her master bedroom for the bridal suite." the bridal suite. They planned to put Serena and Thomas in my personal bedroom. I documented everything. Screenshots of the Pinterest board Serena created 8 months ago titled Beach House Dream Wedding. Her Instagram posts geo-tagged at my address with captions like Final Venue Walkthrough, photos of wedding invitations listing my address as the venue, text messages between my parents discussing my generous donation of the property that I obtained through my mother's unlocked phone during a family dinner 2 weeks prior. My documentation file grew to 347 pages of evidence showing months of wedding planning without my knowledge or consent. The tour company's advance team arrived at 2 p.m. the day before the wedding. I parked across the street to watch the chaos unfold through my binoculars. Serena's face, when the uniformed event coordinator approached her with a clipboard, was absolutely priceless. The woman's professional politeness as she explained their exclusive weekend rental contract. Serena's growing panic as she realized her dream wedding venue was legally unavailable. My phone started ringing immediately. Serena first called saying, "What did you do? There are people here with contracts." "I rented my property to a legitimate business," I replied calmly. "You know, people who actually asked permission and paid market rates." Mom called next, saying, "Rain Elizabeth Bennett, you fix this right now. The whole family is driving down for tomorrow." "The house is unavailable all weekend. The contract is signed and the deposit is paid, non-refundable." The financial carnage was immediate and extensive. Serena had already paid the wedding planner $4,200, the caterer $6,800, and the florist $1,150. None of it was recoverable on 24-hour notice. Thomas's parents scrambled to host 150 people in their quarter-acre backyard, requiring them to rent tables, chairs, and a tent for another $2,100. But the real consequences were just beginning. Within a week, my documentation folder paid off in ways I hadn't expected. The wedding planner, Vanessa, was furious about the venue situation. She'd invested 2 full days in setup based on Serena's fraudulent representation that she owned the property. Vanessa's company sued Serena for $3,200 in wasted labor costs and reputation damage. The caterer followed suit. They'd prepared food for 150 guests, assuming a beachfront service area with specific electrical and water access. Thomas's parents' backyard couldn't accommodate their equipment, forcing them to provide boxed lunches instead of the planned seafood buffet. They sued for $2,800 in additional costs and lost profit margins. I calculate Serena's wedding debacle ultimately cost her and Thomas $19,850 in total. Original vendor payments, last-minute venue costs, legal fees, and lawsuit settlements. Thomas had to dip into his 401k to cover the expenses, incurring early withdrawal penalties of another $1,200. My family's reaction was swift and predictable. Dad showed up at my apartment the following Tuesday demanding I make this right. Mom organized a family intervention dinner at Coral Gables restaurant that Thursday, complete with Aunt Linda for maximum guilt leverage. I arrived prepared. My tablet contained 5 years of documented boundary violations, organized chronologically with photos, receipts, and repair estimates. I'd calculated that my family had cost me $32,280 in total over 5 years through their unauthorized use of my property. Name one time you asked permission before using my house, I challenged Serena directly. The silence was deafening. She literally couldn't. None of them could. I slid the rental agreement across the table. This is how legitimate guests use someone else's property, with permission, with payment, with respect. The tour company weekend went flawlessly. The pharmaceutical executives left my property in pristine condition, wrote a glowing review, and booked me for 2 additional weekends at $12,800 each. I've since registered with 3 vacation rental platforms and average $11,200 in monthly rental income during peak season. My lawyer helped me establish clear legal boundaries. Anyone attempting unauthorized access to my property now faces trespassing charges and a $500 fine per incident. I've had to use this exactly twice, both times with Serena trying to drop by unannounced. The security camera system I installed cost $890 but has been invaluable. Every attempted access is recorded and legally admissible. Insurance companies love detailed security documentation, and I qualified for a 15% premium reduction. 6 months later, my beach house is actually mine again. No more surprise family reunions. No more mysterious food disappearances. No more strangers rifling through my bedroom drawers during small gatherings that somehow become parties for 30 people. My relationship with Thomas improved dramatically. He called 2 weeks after the wedding disaster to apologize and admit he'd always felt uncomfortable with the family's treatment of my property. "I tried to tell Serena we should ask properly," he said. "This whole situation showed me who actually respects boundaries in this family." Thomas and Serena are still married, though they went through 6 months of marriage counseling to work through the financial stress and family drama. Thomas now works overtime at his engineering job to rebuild their emergency fund after the wedding disaster depleted their savings. The financial impact on my life has been transformative. Without subsidizing my family's vacation habits, I'm saving an additional $6,456 annually. The rental income from my property generates approximately $45,000 per year in additional revenue. I've invested that money in a diversified portfolio that's already grown by 12%. Serena eventually came around, though it took 8 months and that marriage counseling with Thomas. She now calls before visiting and actually asks if dates work for me. Last month, she rented my house properly for their anniversary weekend, $400 for 2 nights plus a security deposit with everything documented through my rental platform. My parents took longer to adjust. Dad initially threatened to cut me out of his will, but when he realized I was financially independent and didn't need their money, he backed down. Mom went through a phase of telling relatives I was going through something, before finally accepting that I wasn't backing down. The extended family split into camps. About half think I was justified, especially after I shared the documentation of unauthorized use and costs. The other half, led by Uncle Tom and Aunt Linda, still believe families should have unlimited access to each other's resources. I've accepted that not everyone will understand boundaries. The lesson here is documentation and boundaries. Keep detailed records of everything. Calculate the real financial cost of people's behavior. Get professional legal advice before making major decisions. And never let anyone assume they have rights to your property just because you share DNA. My family learned that generosity has limits and crossing boundaries has consequences. I learned that being strategic beats being emotional every single time. The house is still mine. I'm financially better off, and my family finally respects my property because I made the cost of disrespecting it too high to ignore. Some relatives still think I was harsh, but those same relatives don't have $32,280 in unauthorized property damage over 5 years. They don't pay $2,197 monthly for a house they barely get to use. And they certainly don't have family members planning weddings at their property without permission. The numbers don't lie, and neither do property deeds. Sometimes the only way to teach respect is to make disrespect expensive. In this case, it cost my family almost $20,000 to learn that lesson, worth every penny.